So today, let's talk about sourdough. So recently, I have been experimenting with sourdough. I have been researching about sourdough and its benefits, and I figured the first step would be to figure out how to make my own sourdough starter. And this is made with literally just flour and water, no commercial yeast or anything. So it is farm-caught sourdough yeast starter. So now I'm going to explain how to make your own organic sourdough starter. So step 1, take a glass bowl. Don't worry about a lid for now, we'll get to that later. And into it you add 2 cups of organic flour and 2 cups of filtered water. Now mix it together until it's all combined and smoothened like a paste. And then you take your bowl and put it somewhere warm, whether it's on your stove or somewhere else, uncovered and open to the air for around 48 hours. So after about 24 hours of your starter sitting, go check on it. Mine, after 24 hours, started to get a little bit crusty on top because it was drying out. So what I didn't want to remove the airflow or anything, so what I did is I just set a plate on top of the bowl so it loosely covered it so it was able to stay pretty moist in there. And you should see little bubbles starting to form at the surface, and it might start smelling something like Parmesan cheese, at least mine did. After about 48 hours, what you're going to do is remove your lid if you decided to use one, and you're going to take away about half of your starter. And at this point, just throw it in the trash, discard it, feed it to your chickens. And then you're going to add to it 1 cup of organic flour and another cup of water and stir it together until it's a paste. Then return your cover for another 24 hours. So now on day 3, 4, and 5, you continue the same process of removing the lid, removing half of the starter, adding 1 cup of all-purpose flour, what's organic, and another cup of water. Stir it together, and then return the lid. Now come day 6, what you want to do this time is keep all of the starter that you have in your bowl. And you want to add 1 cup of all-purpose organic flour and another cup of water and mix it in along with everything else. And at this point, you may already be able to use your starter. Sometimes it takes longer depending on how warm your house is, but I was able to use mine come day 6. So on day 7, if your sourdough starter is very, very sour smelling and very bubbly looking, you're ready to make bread with it. So now I'm going to show you how I make my sourdough bread. So sourdough bread does take 2 days to make. It's a lot of waiting, but it is definitely worth it, and it's very easy otherwise. So for this recipe, you're going to need 4 cups of organic all-purpose unbleached flour. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of Himalayan pink salt, around a tablespoon or so of honey, 1.5 cups of warm water. You don't want it to be too hot, just barely warm, and 1 cup of your homemade sourdough starter. And then you're going to mix that together till it's nicely combined into a nice, smooth, sticky dough. So now this is all combined, and I'm just going to cover it with plastic wrap for about 1.5 to 2 hours, and then we'll show you the rest of the process. So it has been about 4 hours since I threw the dough together, and now I just need to knead it. And after the 4 hours, you should have little air bubbles all over the side of your bowl, so you'll know that it has been rising and fermenting. So with clean hands, you're just gonna scoop and pull and knead the dough for a little bit. So like 2 to 5 minutes. So when you're finished kneading, you're gonna cover this bowl back up and set it in a pretty warm spot. So like anywhere like in the oven with the light on is plenty warm, for another 8 to 10 hours. And this allows it to the dough to really ferment and rise and get a nice sour flavor. So I finished kneading, and I'm gonna put this in a nice warm spot for overnight, and then in the morning we'll bake this into loaves. We'll see you then. So my dough has now been rising for around 12 hours because I made it last night, and it is climbing out of the bowl. So I'm going to remove the plastic wrap and shape them into our loaves. I'm gonna flour my workspace. Get this out of the bowl. And then I'm gonna use my scraper. You can do it without a scraper, but it does make it much easier. And you're just gonna kind of shape this into a nice smooth looking loaf. So you're just gonna kind of fold it over like this. So while our little loaves are rising in the kitchen, let's talk about how to take care of a sourdough starter. So once your sourdough starter is completely established, my starter was established in roughly 7 days. You can now put your starter into the fridge to keep it from taking over your kitchen. Let's say you want to make something with your sourdough starter. For example, the bread we just made. When I make bread, I take out 1 cup of sourdough starter and put it into my recipe. And now I need to replace the cup that I took out. So all that you have to do for this is when you feed your starter, is you put in 1 cup of organic flour and 1 cup of filtered water. And then you just mix it together until it's nice and smooth. And then you can put this back into the fridge until the next time you want to bake it. So sometimes people can get busy and you might not get around to baking with your starter for a couple of weeks. And you still need to feed it because it is living. So you would just feed it the 1 cup of flour, the 1 cup of water, stir it up, and place it back into the fridge to keep your starter happy and bubbly and healthy. So this bread has been rising for around 4 hours now, and it is time to score it. You can score it with either a knife, or I'm using a new razor blade, and you're just gonna do an X pattern. So this oven is set at 500 degrees, and the cast iron Dutch oven has been heating up in here for about 30 or so minutes. So it's very hot. Be careful when you're doing this.
And you like to put a pan underneath. Why?
It helps keep the crust from burning. So you're going to place it in there with the parchment paper. And make sure the lid is on tight so it steams it really nicely. So this is going to bake at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. And then after the 20 minutes, I'm going to open up my Dutch oven, remove the parchment paper, and take off the lid. And then you're gonna put it back in the oven and bake it for another 8 minutes. So this loaf is finished. It smells and looks so good. And listen to this crust. It is so crusty. For the second loaf, we're just going to do the same exact baking process for this. So you're gonna put your loaf into your preheated Dutch oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. And then after the 20 minutes, you're gonna take off the lid and you're going to remove the parchment paper and bake it for another 8 minutes. And then hopefully you should have a loaf that looks similar to this.